5 years ago, almost to the day, I was sitting on the floor of a bathroom stall in Ronald Reagan Airport, crying. Even pre-COVID, it's not a spot I'd recommend. It was a busy Monday morning, and I was getting ready to fly out for another long week of management consulting. After 8 months on the job, I was used to feeling stressed, but that morning when I sat down at my gate, I started to panic. My mind went blank, my hands were numb, my heart was racing, and I was sweating with dread at the thought of another week of wall-to-wall work. When I talked to my HR person later that day, she told me it sounded like I'd had an anxiety attack. You can think of that like the precocious younger sibling of a panic attack. She comforted me and she said, "Don't worry, this happens all the time." And she was right. It does happen all the time. When I tell my burnout story at the GSB, people often say, "Me too, I had a breakdown at the airport." Or they tell me about missing a friend's wedding or grandparents' funeral to work on a deal, or how they never had time for therapy, or how they had a relationship or friendship unravel during a busy time at work. Today, I'm going to talk to you about overwork and burnout in US professional culture and how we can start to change it. US professionals work more than we did 30 years ago, and more than our counterparts in other wealthy nations. That overwork is linked to increased rates of stress, heart disease, anxiety, and depression. A lot of people, women in particular, quit their high-powered jobs because they can't afford to sacrifice their health or family well-being, even for a job they love. Stories like mine happen all the time. You might expect me to talk about policies that can make this better, what mental health care, childcare, flexible work arrangements can make these intense jobs more bearable. And that's an important question. But I want to get to the root of the problem and ask why we are all so convinced that high-impact, rewarding work needs to entail a 60-plus hour week. Because I don't think it should. A lot of people assume that working long hours makes you more productive. I'll use this scientific chart to show how people think about productivity. A climb to the top, fueled by hustle and stamina, until you reach the pinnacle of productivity, where everything you touch turns to gold. Yeah, maybe it gets bad if you overstep things, but that probably won't happen to you, right? Research on sleep, brain functioning, and actual people at work all tell a different story. I'll use this chart to show what actually happens as we ramp up our working hours. There's a stretch where if you're working intently, you can get a lot done and feel great. But our brains can only handle 3 or 4 hours of deep work per day. Once you're working so much that you're not getting enough sleep, you're stressed, your personal life's under pressure, there's a steep trade-off. Your critical thinking, creativity, and decision-making go way downhill. At that point, it might be tempting to work more for visibility or credibility, but it's not helping your productivity. Okay, maybe my drawings don't convince you, but I hope that a couple of Stanford professors will. The economist John Pensiville did a study on working hours. He found that after 48 hours per week, marginal productivity declines. After 60 hours, it turns negative. The organizational behavior expert Jeff Pfeffer did a meta-analysis on labor productivity. He found extensive evidence proving that after a point, reducing working hours actually increases worker health, performance, and productivity. A lot of you may be familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's claim that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to reach mastery. It's based on a study of violin students. What Gladwell often leaves out from that study is what the students do outside of practice. The best students don't just practice for 10,000 hours. They also get an hour more of sleep per day on average and protect their downtime. I'm going to pause and take a breath. This is a chance for us to rethink our assumptions about what hard work and productivity need to look like. The trade-off between feeling your best and doing your best work is almost always a false one. Our need for sleep, rest, and play makes us human, and it fuels our ability to do creative, world-changing work. But whatever the science says, it's hard to resist overwork in a culture where looking and feeling busy is such a powerful signal of success. I also assumed that success in high-powered elite jobs required overwork. Since overwork for me means panic attacks on a grimy airport floor, I quit my job in consulting. I also counted myself out of banking, PE, VC, entrepreneurship, law, politics, and a lot of startups. And I'm not the only one counting myself out. Anyone who wants or needs to be an active parent, anyone with community or caregiving responsibilities they can't ignore, anyone who knows their health can't stand up to a round-the-clock schedule. It's not a coincidence that in countries with more regulations around working hours, the gender pay gap is closing faster than it is in the US. So now we know. US professionals work too much. It's hurting our well-being and our work. Plus, normalizing overwork shuts out certain people from high-powered jobs. I also want to acknowledge that overwork is a problem in all parts of the economy, not just the privileged sectors I've been talking about. And if you depend on overtime or shift work for survival, there's not a lot of choice in accepting long hours. That's why it's so crucial that those of us who do have a choice in where and how we work start to change the culture. So how are we going to do this? Overwork culture can feel immutable, normalized by institutions and traditions that we don't control. But any culture is the sum of individual choices and actions. People, particularly people with the influence and access of many GSB students, can start to spread a new normal, where overwork is an occasional burden, not a prerequisite for success. We can start to do this by doing 3 things. First, make conscious trade-offs. Think for a moment now about what your ideal week looks like. Maybe there's family time, volunteer work, exercise, knitting, whatever. Now, going forward, pay attention to when work cuts into those other priorities, and make sure that you feel okay about the trade-off. Don't wait 5 or 10 or 30 years of grinding to realize the opportunity cost of the time you spend working. Second, vote with your feet. Choose companies and managers who respect your time and who understand that you'll be even more brilliant when you have enough sleep, rest, and play. This method is actually already proven to work. More companies are willing to consider things like 4-day weeks, flexible hours, and remote work because their talent, people like you and me, are asking for it. Be part of this change and ask for what you need to feel your best and do your best work. Number 3, don't pay it forward. When you're a manager, don't burn out the next generation with the same traditions and conventions that burned you out. Remember that you can generate more creativity and better decisions on your teams by embracing innate constraints on people's time and energy. I hope that we can admit, at least to ourselves, that we're not superhuman. We can't do everything for everyone at all hours without a cost. When I'm beating myself up because I can't do it all, I remember that cold, gross bathroom floor in Reagan Airport, and I think, I'm not going to let myself go back there. And wherever that place of shame and exhaustion is for you, I don't want you going back there either. Overwork and burnout are not inevitable. we can start to rethink our assumptions about hard work and make conscious choices about the best use of people's time and energy. Thank you.